welcome to our first ever episode of the Clique Hangouts. Today we are hanging out with Alice Living, who absolutely blew me away when I met her earlier on in the year with her incredible transformational story. So Alice is the star of West End musical Annie and has recently written a book, The Body Bible, and she is pretty big in the Instagram world with her health and fitness blog. But she has achieved literally amazing things over the past few years, both in terms of her health and fitness and in terms of her career. So thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thank you for having me.
So I'd like to just actually take it back to the beginning, so how everything kind of started for you. Obviously you've been on pretty transformational process over the past few years in terms of your health, in terms of your career, but if you could just take us back to where it all began for you and what was the sort of the trigger for how you're kind of where you are today.
So I started blogging when I was at university. That was kind of like the start of everything that has taken off for me now. The reason why I started, I went away to theatre school. I had to persuade my parents to go. They really didn't want me to, and I was desperate to kind of follow my passion and go and study musical theatre. So after convincing them, I got a place through the skin of my teeth at a college called Bird College, and spent my entire first year basically hating every second of it. I spent the whole time comparing myself to everyone else, thinking that I wasn't good enough. Theatre schools are an incredibly competitive environment, and I think I went in with already having some sort of like self-esteem complex because I already thought that I wasn't good enough to be there, and that just progressively got worse. Through my first year, I then sort of found comfort in food. I would go out every weekend and get drunk just because it would make me on a level with everyone else, whereas in class I felt like I was below everyone else, and I really got myself into a bad place. And I think it sounds really, really cliche to say, but I genuinely did wake up one morning and I was like, this is ridiculous. I have this incredible opportunity ahead of me. I've worked really, really hard to get here and I'm not making the most of it. And I knew that my diet was probably the thing that was underpinning everything that was really not going well for me. So in terms of like my dance studies and in general my studies, so I was doing dance, singing and acting, everything, I found like my energy levels weren't where they needed to be. So I would wake up in the morning and I'd feel incredibly sluggish. I wouldn't have the stamina to be able to complete a dance class without absolutely like feeling out of breath, and I found like that was a reason why I felt like I was behind everyone else. I also started to gain a lot of weight just throughout my first year of university, and yeah, I think that I knew that my diet was not in a good place, and that's probably where I wanted to start. So I started posting pictures of food on Instagram. I kind of had tried every diet going. So for me, it was really important to move away from those basically, because I knew that was what had got me into this kind of like put on weight, lose weight, put on weight, lose weight phase, and that was what was actually causing me to have such instability within my kind of body. So yeah, I wanted to move away from those, and I found that if I kind of took matters into my own hands and started finding a way of eating that really worked for me, that was going to be a lot better for me than following a plan that would last for X amount of weeks, that I would then fall off the bandwagon at the end of it because I didn't really know what else to do following that. So yeah, I started posting pictures of food, and reading a lot about what was actually good for me. I think there's so much information out there that it was really empowering for me to kind of actually take things into my own hands and be like, okay, what information is out there? What's going to work for me? Because nutrition isn't a one size fits all. So what works for me might not work for the next person. And that's really important. So making those decisions for my own body was actually really empowering. I started to grow a bit of a following through posting these pictures on Instagram, and actually noticed quite a big physical difference as well. And it was through kind of continuing that I then started to notice that my following grew quite a bit, and that's kind of led me to where I am now basically. So
awesome. I find it really interesting actually. You said you just kind of woke up one day and you're like, actually I want to make a change. And so, because quite often sort of these changes are sort of gradual. So I'm guessing things didn't happen overnight or at once.
Absolutely.
Because I guess a lot of it as well is to do with sort of the mindset. So you kind of you can implement these changes into your life, but I think the mindset thing, that sort of takes a little longer, I think, to implement.
Definitely.
So, yeah.
I think for me, it was absolutely the fact that I made gradual changes that's created the most sustainable long-term success with what I'm doing. I think that, yes, I woke up one day and I was like, I need to make a change, but that didn't mean that I absolutely went to eating, you know, well, every single second of every day. No, I didn't. It was a real kind of learning process, and it meant that there were teething problems. There were times when I would have massive binge eats because I would like overly restricted, and there were times when I ate really well for a period of time. It was definitely a learning process, and I think, you know, the first thing that I tell people is that gradual change is the most important thing. But yeah, you're right. In terms of the mindset, I think I'd got to the stage where it was very much needed for me to just be like, I've had enough. And I think you can relate that to anything in life. I think sometimes you get to the stage where it's just enough is enough.
Yeah.
And unless you really want something, you know, you can say like, oh, I'd love to lose weight, or I'd love to, you know, do something. But unless you really, really want that, that's what's going to then spur that kind of actual motivation to do it. So for me, I found that, and I know it does sound really cliche, but yeah, it was just a wake-up call, basically.
And I think actually that's sometimes what is required. You actually have to hit like a huge low to be like, actually, this is going to be the trigger now for me to make massive changes.
Absolutely.
Because I think if life's kind of okay, if you live quite a balanced life and there's nothing that's really bad with it, I don't think you necessarily have that sort of motivation to make huge changes, where if things do get really, really bad, actually you can actually use that to your advantage for, you know, a platform to then do something really incredible afterwards.
Absolutely.
I like that you said as well about it's kind of implementing small steps and doing them daily and do them consistently, because I think a lot of people go wrong because they throw themselves entirely into this new way of living, which is a good thing, but you're always going to see sort of little blips, and then sometimes if people do see these blips, they fall off the wagon and then don't get back onto it, whereas I think it's fine to have these little sort of lapses
Absolutely.
of, you know, motivation or whatever, and then, you know, you just keep going with it.
Yeah.
And being patient with it as well, because
Absolutely. You've literally just summed up everything that I think, because I think, you know, I get people ask me that, like, whether I train every single day or how do I find constant motivation? And, you know, my best thing is that I try and be as transparent as possible, you know, through Snapchat, through Instagram, through everything that I'm doing. I'm always trying to say, you know, guys, like, there are times when I really, really don't feel like going to the gym. There are times when I really don't want to just eat, you know, well, there are times when I just want to eat pizza and ice cream, and that is okay.
I think that's the important thing, like knowing that you can have these lapses. Sort of for you, it's kind of with your eating. For me, I do the same. Like, that we go through times where I'm working really hard, and then all I want to do for a few days is watch Netflix.
Yeah.
And sometimes I think, oh my god, I start beating myself up about it, and I'm like, no, it's fine to actually take your foot off the pedal every now and again, and just, you know, zone out from your normal kind of routine.
Absolutely.
As long as you can then pick it back up again. I think this is the main thing. I actually want to go back to what you kind of touched on earlier as well, about sort of being like transparent in how you kind of present yourself online, because I think it's so easy, especially when you've got like a personal brand, and that's such like an important part of sort of your career. Like, you know, people perceive you in a certain way, and I think it's easy to kind of fall into the trap of thinking that you have to be this sort of perfect person. You know, you have to, you know, fit into this sort of box at all times, whereas actually that for me always feels, when you do see people like that, it can always feel a bit inauthentic, because nobody is this sort of glossy vision all the time. And I think that's the thing with social media, because it's so easy to sort of curate your lifestyle, and so people only ever see your highlight reels, and then people get this false sense of illusion of, oh, their life must be perfect all the time, they eat healthily all the time, and then you're saying, you know, you're willing to sort of show that you do sort of have lapses every now and again, and that is totally fine.
I mean, my favourite things is Snapchat and the Instagram stories, where I can show that kind of 360 approach to what I do. So Instagram, you know, I love creating beautiful pictures of food. I really enjoy it, and I think that, you know, that's what's worked for my feed, and that's what I tend to continue to do. However, you know, that doesn't mean that that doesn't mean that I'm just going to show that. I like to show the behind the scenes of that as well, you know. There's like last weekend or the weekend before that, I went out drinking with my friend and I showed that I was on a night out and just having a good few drinks and like having a laugh. And those sorts of things, like, because I didn't put it on Instagram, the majority of my audience would think, you know, she does live this kind of like perfect life. I think if you back it up with those kind of other social feeds where you can show that kind of 360 image of a person and kind of show that, you know, it's not always just a pretty picture of food, that there's a lot more going on behind that. That's really, really important, and it's why social media is moving towards that kind of way. You know, you look at YouTube and you look at Snapchat and you look at Instagram stories, like everyone's kind of moving towards this video kind of imagery, which is doing so much better because it's that bit more engaging and you get to see that bit more of someone so that you can understand them as a person instead of just a perfect picture.
Exactly. And it's the live element as well, because
absolutely.
I think with Instagram, people they curate the images because when people first turn up to a feed, like they want to see like it all being glossy, and that's the thing that encourages people to follow. But I think to have that other side to it, so that the live element of it, the Instagram stories now, it kind of gives sort of a behind the scenes action of okay, this is sort of what I'm giving to you, like the curated version, but actually this is the raw live in-person stuff that's going on as well. So kind of having the balance between the two, so you maintain that sort of professional personal brand, but you've got sort of the authenticity with that as well. Actually, I just want to go back to sort of the Instagram, because you've obviously built up a huge engaged audience on Instagram, and it can be such a powerful tool. Obviously, you've been able to utilize it now, and you've built a business off the back of it. But in terms of getting that following, because you know you're over 400 and something thousand followers every time I look, it goes up, which is incredible. But in terms of getting a following like that, what are your sort of tips, and how do you kind of keep that audience engaged?
I think that for me, consistency has been an excellent thing. So I have a very consistent way of creating my feed. So I post a breakfast and a dinner every single day. On top of that, I'll do my workout videos, and I'll do some like motivational stuff and mindset stuff that I feel is really important as well. I think that gives my audience a reason to come back. I always think that an audience needs to know that they're going to be getting something from you. So, you know, anyone can like a picture on Instagram because it's a beautiful photo, but not everyone's going to follow you. You know, they can like your photo, but they're not going to come back because they want to. I would only follow someone personally if I was going to be getting a regular kind of something from them, whether that's motivation, whether that's inspiration, whether that's, you know, recipes or workouts. There's something that you've got to give people to get them to keep coming back for more. And I feel like I've kind of got into a pattern with that. The best things that I did, you know, starting out, collaborating with others, working with other bloggers. Don't see them as competition. Everyone should be working towards the same goal, which is creating a happy, healthy feed and everyone having a really good relationship with everyone else.
This is actually where a lot of people go wrong, because they see sort of a really competitive industry. For example, the fitness industry is super, super competitive. And it's so easy to fall into the trap of seeing other people in your industry like the enemy. And I'm like, this is ridiculous. Like, you know, you can share your audiences. You both appeal to the same kind of audience.
Exactly.
And if people buy into you, your competitors, they're going to buy into you as well.
Absolutely.
So it's only ever going to benefit you both, these collaborations, because you collaborate with quite
loads of people,
don't you?
Loads of people. And also like just generally reaching out to other people in the industry. It might not necessarily be that I post something with them, but I do reach out to a lot of people within the industry, and I've done that from day one. So I've also, you know, reached out to like loads of PTs that I have seen on Instagram in London or around London, and that I've thought they're doing a really good thing. They're a really good trainer. I'd love to come and like maybe do work with them and kind of learn from them. Collaborating with anyone and everyone, even if they don't have a massive social feed, just sometimes getting together with someone can really help to spur and create amazing content, especially if they bring something slightly different to what you do. I think it's a really good thing to do.
I think that's actually a really good point, because I think it's really sort of tempting to kind of just do the collaborations with people that are in a same niche to you, but actually I found some of the best things that I've done. So for example, we met at Fitfluence event. Actually working with them has been amazing, because I've met people that are outside of sort of the business coaching industry that I'm in, and you know, when I go into sort of like the fitness industry, I'm kind of the only person that's at the Fitfluence event. And people are like, oh, I've never really heard of a business coach before, so I kind of feel like, you know, I'm only the one that's still doing it, whereas if you
amazing.
kind of surround yourself in your own niche, it kind of can sometimes feel a bit overwhelming, because everybody is trying to, you know, break through the noise and trying to do the same sort of thing. So like cross industry collaborations, I'm a big fan of. So in terms then of you've built up sort of a career now of you know, using social media and doing sort of all these, you know, projects with different companies, but I'm guessing it didn't when you started your blogging and your Instagram. It wasn't. Did you sort of envision that this was going to become the career that it is today?
Never.
Or?
I never even knew it was a thing. I think, we were talking about the success of a social media feed. How do you grow a following? And I think that the people that I, kind of collaborated with, everyone that I've worked with closely, I tell you, there's one thing that we all have in common is that we started it for the right reasons. So I think now you see so many people, and we were having this conversation earlier, how so many people just want loads of followers and they want to have an amazing blog, but it's because they want that kind of almost insta success.
Yeah.
When I started my blog, it was for very selfish reasons. It was for myself and only myself. So, there was never that kind of, I never did it because I wanted to get followers. I never even knew that was a thing. It just so happened that I started it for myself, and I happened to grow an audience along the way, but doing something that I was doing for my own reasons. The people that I've also worked with, they're the same. So they've always started their blog because they've started it for themselves, and it just so happens that along the way they've engaged with their audience and they've grown a following. But it's been for the right reasons. And I think that for me is something that's really, really stood me in good stead, because even now to this day, my Instagram motivates me. I'm really motivated every day to cook really well. I love making and trying out new foods and posting them on my blog. I find it's still a daily motivation for me, and I'm still inspired to create content every single day because I'm passionate about it. I think if you start a feed that you're not necessarily 100% passionate about, or it's just like, I want to get loads of followers and I want to work with brands, but you're not prepared to put in that kind of work to get there, you can tell straight away that there's no passion behind someone's content. It's just kind of like, I'm just going to do this and I'm just going to do a bit of that. You can always tell, and people see through it. And we were talking about authenticity. I think that's such an important thing, being authentic. What is your brand? Why are you doing what you're doing? Do you understand, and do you feel passionate about what you're doing? Because if you don't get into it, because you're going to have to create content once, twice, maybe even 3 times a day for the next 1, 2, 3 years to even get to a following that is going to be able to work with brands. And if you can't do that, and if you can't have that commitment, don't even think about it.
I think you hit the nail on the head there in terms of how long it takes, because I speak with people and they're like, oh, okay, I want to make a business out of social media, and I'll build a following, and then all of a sudden I'll get paid all of this money to create content. And I think the reality of it is very different, because it can take so long, and especially now, like you said, social media, Instagram in particular, is so saturated. So to actually kind of get to the level of audience that you need to be able to monetize it, it's going to take you a long time, and it's going to feel what may sort of be really exciting and new to begin with. Are you still going to feel that way about it a year down the line, 2 years down the line? Because if you're not, you need to think about that now, because it can get repetitive. I know for me, I always post the same kind of content, and it's pretty much not changed since I started it. And I love it. That's kind of the thing that makes me tick. I love all the motivational stuff, but it does feel repetitive. After
and
a while,
it will do. And it will. So also, sorry, you were touching on saying about how you've been doing it consistently. I think the other thing that I would absolutely recommend is that if in business, even if it's just a kind of blogging for fun as a hobby, always be able to switch off. Because that is the most important thing. For me, I've never ever put everything on social media. I've never ever just been like, right, this is my life 24/7, here it is. I've always held stuff back. I've always made sure that there's a time in the day when I put my phone down and I switch off from it. And then when I do go back to it, I enjoy it and I like seeing what people do, but it's not a 24/7 thing for me. I think the danger is that you can become all encompassed by social media. You spend your life scrolling through your feed, comparing yourself to the people on your feed, looking what everyone else is doing, and then your content becomes controlled by what everyone else is doing, because you're constantly, oh, well, she did this and she did that and that seemed to do well, so I'm going to do that. Whereas if it comes from you, if you organically create your content, honestly, I know it sounds silly, but you can tell when it's coming from someone. You can tell when they've, sat there and, we were talking about earlier how sometimes your best work is your most spontaneous stuff.
Exactly.
There are times when I literally will just wake up in the morning and I'm like, right, I'm feeling really motivated today. I'm going to write something, and I'll put it into my notes in my phone, and I'll be like, I'm going to save that because that's a really good something. But it was completely spontaneous. It wasn't like, right, I need to post a motivational quote. Oh my God, what am I going to write? Okay, you know what I mean? Because then it feels incredibly forced.
I'm a big fan of create before you consume, because it's so easy to kind of look at what everyone else is doing, and then sometimes without even realising it, you're kind of copying what they're doing, or not directly.
I love that. Yeah,
it's just the words they use, and to be honest, it's a trap that I fell into very early on, and I actually went through a total rebrand really early on, because what I realised I'd kind of built this platform and it just wasn't my voice at all, and I looked back at it and I was like, God, I was using language that I didn't use, like, even aesthetically I was like, I just don't like this, and it was because I consumed so much of other people's work and it filtered into my own. And so now whenever I write a blog post or whenever I'm kind of coming up with something new for my site, I always make sure that that's the first thing I do in the day, so I'm not kind of distracted by what everyone else is doing. As well, sort of with the social media thing and like switching off, like I think it's a really difficult thing, especially when that is kind of like your business and your work. But what you said about sort of not looking about what everyone else is doing, actually when I kind of first started this, like I said, so I spent a lot of time kind of analysing what other people in my sort of industry were doing. I've now actually got to the stage where I don't really kind of pay too much attention to what other people are doing at all. Like I kind of focus on my own stuff.
I'm the same.
And it's just...
And you tend to have like your favourite handful of people. So I've got my favourite bloggers that I really, really love following. I love their content and I'm genuinely inspired and motivated by them. But it's a very, very small handful of people. I will, you can turn on post notifications. So there's probably 10 maybe people that I turn on post notifications for. I love seeing their stuff, but that is it. And, I don't spend hours scrolling through my feed. I don't really spend time because I create what I want to create and I'm passionate about it. And that doesn't need any kind of motivation from anyone else other than myself. And I think you're absolutely right. Even without realizing it, you can create content that isn't your voice because you've been kind of almost dictated to without even realizing by everyone else and what everyone else is doing, particularly if you're trying to grow the business, because you're constantly seeing what's doing well. So, for example, people that follow me and they're just starting out, they might kind of try and recreate what I'm doing, but it's not going to be from them. It's going to be like, right, well, because they did this, I'm going to try and do this, or they wrote in this way, so I'm going to try and do this. I love following bloggers who kind of just do their own thing because it's so nice to see. No one wants to follow the same stuff every single day, and if there's someone already doing it, do something else. It sounds silly,
because I think you can, to a certain extent, like a lot of content's always going to be regurgitated, especially if it's kind of like fact stuff that people are going to regurgitate. But I think it's kind of making yourself, putting your own spin on things.
But at the end of the day, no one else is ever going to have your voice. You are unique. That is what makes you special, and no one else will ever be able to recreate your own voice. So don't try and recreate anyone else's. Do your stuff. Do what is you. If it works, great. If it doesn't, maybe, try and find other motivation, but don't try and copy or don't try and recreate because it's not going to sound authentic at all.
No. Just wanted to quickly talk about sort of failures, because I guess you've achieved a hell of a lot of things. You're doing amazingly. You've got, you've written one book, you've got another book that's coming out in January, is it? But have you had any slip-ups along the way? Like, have you hit any road bumps or, hit some certain hurdles?
I think so. I mean, like, I don't put a lot of what I go through in terms of like emotionally or kind of slip-ups and failures. I don't really tend to publicize that as much as everything that I do, the food and stuff, that's great, but it's not really telling a story about me as a person. So I don't tend to publicize that sort of things. But of course, like, I've gone through a really, really hard breakup in the last year, and that was a difficult time for me. Like, I never put that on social, but it was something that, I just found it a really difficult time. And actually, it's really, really interesting. Like, I look on my social feeds and I can see when I was like going through that phase. And it wasn't necessarily that I wrote, I'm really upset today, but I could just tell there was a bit of an emptiness to what I was posting. And I think that's something that I think it just shows you, like, you don't necessarily have to put everything out there, but you can definitely tell that kind of voice. You can always tell if you're in a good mood and a bad mood. You can always tell. And things like that. I think dealing with emotions outside of social, I think have been for me the most difficult thing, and having to still remain this kind of positive and happy person, because that's the kind of ethos that I always try and put across. That was challenging sometimes, of course. And like, you know, there's been other times I've had family stuff going on and all sorts of stuff. It's not always rainbows and butterflies, and I think that's, you know, maybe I should share that more. Maybe I should show that side of things. But for me, I don't know whether I'm ready to take that step yet. But yeah, of course, there's been times where like I've just been like, I really, really don't want to do it anymore. And you kind of lose kind of passion for it. And that's always going to happen. That happens in anything. That happens with, you know, there were times on the show and I was like, I love performing, of course, but there were times I was like, I really don't want to go to work today.
And
I don't want to do it.
How do you sort of stay like motivated in those sort of like moments? Do you just kind of have like a little pep talk with yourself? Like
I think it generally comes from other people.
Yeah.
I'm a naturally quite self-motivated person, yes. But when there are times that I'm really low, I do find it difficult to pick myself back up. So I need someone else just to be like, come on, let's have a pep talk.
So lastly then,
yes.
So we are a big fan of quotes at the
Okay.
So words to live by then. Do you have sort of a favourite phrase or quote that you kind of always...
I've got absolutely loads, but my favourite is never a failure, always a lesson. So everything that I do in life, everything that's ever happened to me, I will always try and put a positive spin on it or take something from it.
Yeah.
No matter what's happened, you know, there's been times when the shit's really hit the fan, basically, excuse my language. But if I can always go back to that place, even if it's like 2 months, 3 months, 6 months later, years later, even if I can go back to that place and be like, okay, what can I learn from that?
I think a lot of people get really hung up on this idea of failure, like especially if they're starting something new, whether it's kind of a new project or you know, new business. And they get so hung up on like, oh God, well, what if it doesn't work out? What if it fails? And I always say it only fails when you stop trying, because you know you hit these road bumps. That's not failing. That is just part of the journey.
But also, it only fails when you actually accept that it is a failure.
Yeah.
So if you tell yourself that you have failed, of course it's a failure. You're going to beat yourself up. You're going to get into that place where you're like, oh my God, this hasn't worked. Whereas if you can look at that situation and be like, okay, X, Y, and Z didn't work, but this was good, this was good, this was good. So what can I do with those things that I can then progress and move forwards?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely,
so then you never look at it as a failure. You only look at it as a bump in the road, like you said. So that's how I try and be. I think that's the best way, because otherwise you can get bogged down and feel as though you're not doing well.
No, exactly. Well, thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. I know, literally talking for England here.
So great chatting with you. So, upcoming projects then. So you've got a new book.
Yes.
When is it coming out?
So my second book comes out on the 29th of December.
Awesome.